raster image, a digital photograph essentially, into a cartoon or an outline or a shape that you can use as a vector image using Adobe Illustrator. And in this case, I'm using Illustrator 22 from Adobe Creative Cloud. I've got my mouse image. I'm going to drop that onto the Illustrator icon so that the JPEG image of the mouse opens in Illustrator. And as you might know, Adobe Illustrator is useful for creating vector images, which means images that are generated by mathematical descriptions of lines, essentially, not a raster image like this picture of a mouse where every single pixel of the mouse in this picture is defined by the color of each individual pixel. So in order to turn this mouse into a vector drawing of the mouse, which could be useful for many reasons. So for example, maybe you didn't take this picture of the mouse, I didn't, I'm not attributing who did actually at this point, which is inappropriate of me to do. There's no citation here. But I've stolen this mouse picture from Google Images, and I want to make, say, an icon or some clip art of this mouse based on the shape of this mouse, but I want to make it my own way. That's one reason to do this process of turning a raster image into a vector image. To do that, we need to have the image selected, which I've already done because we can see the control handles. And we also have to have a tool palette open. That's the image trace tool palette in the window menu. So with the image selected and the image trace palette open, the main thing I want to do is to choose the silhouettes preset, which is going to have Illustrator basically take a look digitally at this mouse picture, identify the areas of high contrast, like where the coat meets the white background, and it will draw basically an outline, a silhouette of this image. So select that. It gives me an error message that said that this could take a while because it's a big image, and it did not take a very long while, and there it is. Now you'll notice that there is some funny little images that are these little points that are supposed to be representing the fur and individual hairs, the whiskers of the mouse and so forth. Don't look great. You can change some of these in the advanced part of the image trace palette. You can change the number of corners and the number of paths and the noise to try to reduce some of that busy line shapes to make it maybe a smoother silhouette of a mouse. But let's say I'm happy with this and I want to actually be able to do something with this, like convert it from a totally solid black mouse to an outline of a mouse. And maybe I want to fill that outline with something other than black. To be able to actually access that path, we would normally use the white arrow, the direct selection tool, to access paths. But so far, we haven't told Illustrator to actually create the paths for us. And remember, again, in the image trace palette, down here at the bottom, it tells us that what it's done so far is made two paths. That is two lines. They're very long and curvy lines, but this entire representation of the mouse is made up of two lines with 576 anchor points. So if we want to actually see those lines, which is what people typically want to do in Illustrator to be able to manipulate those lines, we need to select the mouse, which it is, and go to Object, Image Trace, Expand. That will give us access to those individual lines. So again, if I use the selection tool, I don't get access to those two lines and several hundred anchor points. But if I use the direct selection tool, now I can see how this mouse was generated in Illustrator. And if I zoom in, I get a better idea of where exactly all those anchor points are and how Illustrator took the outline of this mouse and created a really long single, well actually there were two paths, but this is all basically one path. If I select one of the anchor points, this is one of those two paths, the outline of the mouse. So let's say I wanted to do something again, like maybe I don't want this mouse to be solid black. Notice that in the tool palette here on the left side of the screen, we've got the fill color is currently black and the stroke is currently transparent. So if I wanted to make this a transparent filled black stroked mouse, I could just use the swap fill and stroke but I'd have to have the mouse selected if I wanted to do that. And that will switch the fill with the stroke. So now I have a transparent filled mouse with a black stroke. And maybe that's what I want. Or maybe I would like to turn that into a yellow filled mouse, in which case well, I could make it a gray filled mouse. But if I change this into an RGB color palette, which I'm never really sure why it won't let me do that. So I'll make the stroke whatever color that is. Let's see, close to yellow. I'm currently in the RGB color mode, so it should be pretty much yellow. And then I could swap the stroke and the fill, and now I've got a gray stroked mouse with a yellow fill. And you can zoom in and out as much as you want and see that those strokes and those paths are really smooth, and this will look good at any magnification. So, for example, maybe if I wanted to use this mouse as a bullet point, I'd want to shrink it down to the size of a bullet point that I could use in front of some text in a bulleted list. And the only reason this looks funny now is because I just shrank the mouse, but I didn't shrink the stroke width. So if I wanted to make that a little bit more visible, I could make the weight of the stroke 0.1 points, for example, and there. And I have a nice mouse-shaped bullet point that I could use in some text or something like that. So we've just taken a look at how to use the image trace tool in Illustrator to convert a raster image, a digital photograph, into an outline. And there are lots and lots and lots of other things that you can do with this approach. Hopefully this is helpful, and please let me know if you have any questions about this process. Thanks for listening.